Well, let me tell you something. At my age, you think you've seen it all. You think nothing can surprise you anymore. But life has a funny way of reminding you that there's always one more lesson to learn, one more story to tell. And this story, this particular encounter, it's one that still makes me shake my head and chuckle even now. It happened about 3 years ago. I was flying from Los Angeles to New York for a business meeting. Now, I've been in this industry long enough to know that aviation is more than just getting from point A to point B. It's about service, dignity, and treating people with respect. That's why when I invested heavily in SkyWest regional years back and eventually became majority owner, I made it my mission to ensure that every passenger, and I mean every single one, was treated like they mattered. But here's the thing about being successful in business and in life. You learn pretty quickly that you don't need to walk around announcing who you are. You don't need a neon sign above your head. I've always believed that a man's character speaks louder than his title. And I've made it a point throughout my life to travel modestly, to blend in, to be just another passenger, no entourage, no special treatment, just me and my boarding pass like everyone else. So that day, I dressed simply jeans, a comfortable button-down shirt, a light jacket, and my old leather boots. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed movie star or airline owner. Just comfortable traveling clothes for a cross-country flight. I had my first-class ticket, seat to Ampiers, window seat, and I was looking forward to a quiet flight where I could review some documents and maybe catch a nap. I arrived at lax early, as I always do. Punctuality is something my mother drilled into me when I was a boy, and it stuck with me through all these years. I went through security without any fuss. I grabbed a coffee and made my way to the gate. Gathered my carry-on and headed down the jetway. Now, when I stepped onto that plane, I noticed him immediately. You know how sometimes you just get a feeling about someone? He was standing in the aisle near the front, and even from behind you could tell this was a man who thought very highly of himself. An expensive suit, and I mean expensive, probably Italian, custom-tailored, the kind of suit that cost more than most people make in a month. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His haircut was precise. And he wore a watch that caught the light every time he moved his wrist. One of those watches that's more about status than telling time. But it wasn't the clothes that struck me. It was the attitude, the way he stood, the way he gestured impatiently at the flight attendant, the way he seemed to occupy more space than he needed to physically and energetically. You could practically see the aura of self-importance radiating off him. I made my way down the aisle, nodding politely to the crew, and when I reached row 2, I stopped. There he was, sitting in my seat, seat 2 Ampas, the window seat I'd selected when I booked the flight weeks earlier. He had his laptop open, his briefcase in the seat next to him, and he was typing away furiously, completely oblivious to the fact that he was in someone else's assigned seat. Now, I'm not one for confrontation. Never have been. In my movies, sure, my characters might solve things with a steely glare or a well-timed line, but in real life, I believe in handling things calmly and respectfully. So, I cleared my throat gently and said, "Excuse me, sir. I think you're in my seat." He didn't even look up, just kept typing like I hadn't spoken at all. I waited a moment, giving him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't hear me. The plane was filling up. There was noise. Conversations happening all around. So I spoke a bit louder. "Excuse me, this is seat 2 Ampas. That's my assigned seat." This time he looked up, and the look he gave me, I'll never forget it. It was the kind of look that said he'd already sized me up in half a second and found me completely beneath his notice. His eyes traveled from my weathered face down to my casual clothes and back up again, and I could see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. He saw an old man, someone who didn't matter, someone who could be dismissed. "The seat's taken," he said flatly, then went right back to his laptop. Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement that he might be in the wrong. Just 3 words delivered with complete dismissal, as if that settled the matter entirely. I felt something stir inside me. Not anger exactly. I've learned to control that over the years. But something else, a kind of weary disappointment at human nature. Here was a grown man, probably successful in his field, educated, wealthy, and yet completely lacking in basic courtesy and respect. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice even, "but I selected this seat when I booked my ticket. I have seat 2 Ampas on my boarding pass. Perhaps there's been a mix-up with your seat assignment." He sighed heavily, the kind of exaggerated sigh that's meant to communicate what an inconvenience you're being. He closed his laptop with a sharp snap and finally turned to look at me directly. "Look, old man," he said, "and I want you to really hear those words," old man said with such condescension, such utter contempt, "I'm not moving. I have important work to do. I need this window seat for my presentation, and I don't have time for this. There are plenty of other seats on this plane. Why don't you move to the back and find one there? The back? He actually told me to move to the back like I was some kind of second-class citizen who should be grateful just to be on the plane at all. The flight attendant a young woman named Sarah, I remember her name because of what happened later, had been watching this exchange from the galley. She came over quickly, her professional smile firmly in place, though I could see the concern in her eyes. Sir, she addressed the man in the suit. May I see your boarding pass? We need to make sure everyone is in their correctly assigned seats before we can close the door. He waved his hand dismissively. I'm in first class. That's all that matters. This seat is fine. I understand, sir, but this gentleman has seat 2 ampus assigned on his boarding pass. If you could show me your ticket, we can find your correct seat. And I said, I'm not moving. His voice rose sharply, loud enough that other passengers were starting to turn and stare. I am a Platinum Elite member of this airline. Do you know how much money I spend on flights every year? Do you have any idea who I am? And there it was, the inevitable question of someone whose entire self-worth is tied up in their perceived status. Do you know who I am? As if that should matter. As if that should give him the right to take whatever he wanted, treat people however he pleased. Sarah remained calm and professional. Sir, I'm sure we can resolve this quickly if you could just show me your boarding pass. He reached into his jacket pocket with an irritated jerk and pulled out his boarding pass, practically throwing it at her. She looked at it and I saw her expression change slightly. She glanced at me, then back at him. Sir, your assigned seat is 5C, the middle seat in row 5. This gentleman is correct. He has seat 2 ampus. The man's face flushed red. That's impossible. I booked a window seat. I specifically requested a window seat. I'm not sitting in a middle seat like some economy passenger. Fix it. I apologize for any confusion, sir, Sarah said, maintaining her composure admirably. But according to our system, you're assigned to 5C. All the other window seats in first class are taken. If you'd like, I can check to see if there are any available upgrades or alternative seating options on a later flight. A later flight? He stood up abruptly, and for a moment, I thought he might actually become physically aggressive. Do you have any idea what I have writing on this trip? I have a meeting with investors in New York that could make or break a $50 million deal. I need to work on this flight. I need this seat, and some old man who probably got his ticket on discount isn't going to ruin this for me. There was a moment of silence. The entire first-class cabin was watching now. Other passengers in their seats, flight attendants paused in their pre-flight duties, everyone frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. I could have told him right then and there, could have pulled out my identification, could have quietly informed him that I wasn't just any passenger, but something in me resisted. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was curiosity. I wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted to see if this man had any decency buried under all that arrogance, any capacity for basic human respect. Sir, I said quietly, I understand you're under pressure. Business can be stressful, but this is my assigned seat. I arrived on time and I'm simply asking you to move to your own seat. That's all. He laughed. Actually laughed. A short barking sound without any humor in it. You know what your problem is, old-timer. You're from a different generation, you don't understand how the world works now. It's about efficiency, about making things happen, about results. People like me, we drive this economy. We create jobs. We make deals. We move billions of dollars. And people like you. He looked me up and down again. You're just in the way. I've been insulted before in my years in Hollywood and business and life. You develop a thick skin. But there was something about this particular dismissal that struck a nerve. Not because it hurt me personally, but because of what it represented, this attitude that some people matter more than others. That wealth and status give you the right to treat others as if they're invisible, as if their dignity doesn't count. The captain had been informed of the delay and came out of the cockpit. He was a veteran pilot, someone I'd actually met a few times over the years, though he showed no sign of recognizing me in my casual attire. Gentlemen, he said firmly, we need to resolve this now. We're delaying the flight. Sir, he addressed the man in the suit. You need to move to your assigned seat or I'm going to have to ask you to leave the aircraft. You're going to throw me off? The man's voice dripped with disbelief and indignation. Do you know how many flights I take with this airline? Do you know that I could make one phone call and have your job? I know people high up in this company. Very high up. The captain didn't flinch. Sir, FAA regulations require all passengers to be in their assigned seats. This isn't negotiable. You have two choices. Sit in seat 5C or leave the aircraft. You have 60 seconds to decide. For a long moment, the man just stood there clearly weighing his options, probably calculating whether he could actually afford to miss this flight. Finally, with a look of pure venom, he grabbed his briefcase and laptop and pushed past me, roughly, deliberately bumping my shoulder as he went. This isn't over, he muttered. You just made a very big mistake. Old man. He threw himself into seat 5C with such force that the passengers on either side of him actually leaned away. He sat there radiating fury, his jaw clenched, his fingers white-knuckled on the armrests. I settled into my seat on my correctly assigned seat and pulled out my phone to send a quick message before we took off. Sarah came by and quietly apologized for the incident. Please don't worry about it. I told her with a smile. You handled that beautifully, professional and calm. That's exactly the kind of service I like to see. She seemed relieved and thanked me before moving on to complete the pre-flight checklist. The flight took off smoothly. I did try to work on my documents, but I kept stealing glances back at row 5. The man was working furiously on his laptop, occasionally making calls during the period when devices were allowed, his voice carrying even though he was clearly trying to speak quietly. I could hear snippets: incompetent staff, unacceptable treatment, formal complaint. Someone will pay for this. About an hour into the flight, after the meal service, I decided it was time. I pressed the call button, and when Sarah came over, I asked her quietly if I could speak with the head flight attendant and the captain when convenient. A few minutes later, I was invited to the small area near the cockpit. The head flight attendant, Michael, and Captain Rodriguez were both there. Is everything all right, mister? Michael glanced at my ticket information on his tablet, and I saw his eyes widen as he recognized the name. Then he looked at my face more carefully, and the recognition was complete. Oh my God, Mr. Eastwood. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I held up a hand. Please, no apologies necessary. You couldn't have known, and honestly, that's exactly how I prefer it. But I wanted to ask about the passenger in 5C. Has he made any formal complaints yet? Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. He's demanded to speak with me twice. He wants to file complaints against Sarah, against you, against the airline. He's threatening lawsuits and says he's going to make sure everyone involved loses their jobs. I nodded slowly. What's his name? Michael checked his tablet. Marcus Thornton. He's listed as a Platinum Elite member, flies with us frequently for business. Mr. Thornton, I repeated. And he really does fly with us regularly, about twice a month, according to his record. Usually first class, always between LA and New York or Chicago. I thought about it for a moment. Here was a man who spent considerable money with the airline I owned, who flew regularly, who should have been exactly the kind of customer we valued. But he was also someone who treated people, staff and fellow passengers alike, with contempt and disrespect. He represented something I'd spent my entire business life fighting against. The idea that money gave you the right to be cruel. Here's what I'd like to do, I told them. When we land, I'd like you to arrange for Mr. Thornton to be met by airport services. Tell him that his complaint has been taken very seriously and that senior management would like to speak with him immediately to address his concerns. Bring him to the airline's executive lounge at JFK. Can you arrange that? They both nodded, looking curious but professional. And please make sure Sarah knows she did nothing wrong. In fact, I want her commended for her professionalism under difficult circumstances. Make a note in her file. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Michael said, when we landed at JFK, I gathered my things and was one of the first off the plane. I made my way quickly to the executive lounge, a space I'd had redesigned just last year to be more welcoming and comfortable. I asked the staff there to prepare the small conference room and to bring Mr. Thornton there when he arrived. Then I waited. About 20 minutes later, I heard voices outside. The door opened and Marcus Thornton strode in, still wearing that expensive suit, still radiating that same self-important. But now there was also satisfaction on his face. He thought he was about to watch people lose their jobs. He thought justice, his version of it, was about to be served. He stopped short when he saw me sitting there alone at the conference table. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I'm supposed to be meeting with senior management." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Please have a seat, Mr. Thornton. I'm not sitting down with you. I'm here to file a complaint about you, among others. Where's the manager?" I stood up slowly, walked to the small credenza on the side of the room, and poured 2 glasses of water. I brought one back and set it in front of the empty chair. "Mr. Thornton, my name is Clint Eastwood. You might know me from movies, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here because I own this airline. Majority shareholder. I'm as senior as management gets. I've seen a lot of expressions in my time as an actor and director. I've watched people portray shock, disbelief, fear, embarrassment, but nothing I'd ever seen on screen quite matched what happened to Marcus Thornton's face in that moment. The color drained from his cheeks, his mouth opened and closed without sound. His briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a thud. "You are yes," I said simply. "And before you say anything else, I want you to listen. Really listen, because what I'm about to tell you is more important than your deal, more important than this flight, more important than whether or not you keep your platinum status with this airline." I sat back down and waited until he, moving like a man in a dream, slowly lowered himself into the chair across from me. "You called me an old man today twice. You told me to move to the back of the plane. You treated me like I was worthless, like my time and my dignity meant nothing compared to yours. And you know what? If it had just been about me, I probably would have let it go. I've been insulted before. I'll be insulted again. At my age, that kind of thing rolls off pretty easy." I took a sip of water and continued. "But it wasn't just about me. You treated Sarah, a flight attendant who was simply doing her job, with contempt. You dismissed Captain Rodriguez, a man with 30 years of flying experience. You made every person in that first-class cabin uncomfortable with your behavior. And you did all of this because you truly believed that your money, your status, your important business deal gave you the right to." He tried to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. "You said something that really stuck with me. You said that people like you drive the economy, create jobs, make deals, move billions of dollars. And you're probably right about that. I'm sure you're very good at what you do. I'm sure you are important in your field. But here's what you don't understand. None of it gives you permission to treat other human beings like they're beneath you." I leaned forward. "Do you know why I travel the way I do? Why I don't surround myself with assistants and handlers and people clearing the way for me? Because the moment you start believing you're more important than everyone else, the moment you start thinking that the rules don't apply to you, that's the moment you stop being a decent human being, that's the moment you lose something essential about what makes us human." The silence in that room was profound. Marcus Thornton sat there, his expensive suit suddenly seeming like a costume, his confident demeanor completely shattered. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say." "That's a start," I told him. "Not knowing what to say is better than saying the wrong thing with complete confidence. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen. First, Sarah is going to receive a commendation and a bonus for her professional handling of a difficult situation. Captain Rodriguez is going to get a letter of appreciation for his leadership. Every staff member who witnessed what happened today is going to know that their dignity and their professional judgment is valued and protected by this airline." He nodded slowly, waiting for the hammer to fall on him. "As for you, Mr. Thornton, I have a decision to make. I could ban you from flying with us. I could revoke your platinum status. I could make sure that every airline in our partnership network knows about your behavior today. And believe me, part of me wants to do exactly that. His face had gone from pale to ashen, but I'm not going to do that. Do you know why? Because I believe people can change. I believe that sometimes we need to be shown our worst selves before we can become better. Today, you were shown your worst self. The question is, what are you going to do with that information? I pulled out a card and slid it across the table to him. This is the contact information for our customer relations department. Not to file a complaint. You don't get to do that, but to issue apologies. I want you to write personal apologies to Sarah, to Captain Rodriguez, and to every staff member who was affected by your behavior today. Real apologies, not the corporate kind that lawyers write. Apologies that show you understand what you did wrong. He picked up the card with shaking hands. Second, I'm going to suspend your platinum status for 6 months. During that time, you'll fly like everyone else. Maybe it'll give you perspective. Maybe it'll remind you that every person on every flight is someone's father, mother, son, daughter, someone who matters. I understand, he said hoarsely. Third, and this is the most important part. I want you to think about that $50 million deal you're working on. Think about all that money, all that prestige, all that success. Then I want you to ask yourself, if you get everything you want professionally, but become the kind of person who treats others with contempt, what have you really achieved? I stood up and walked to the door, then turned back to him one last time. You know what I've learned in my years on this earth. Mr. Thornton, the measure of a person isn't their bank account or their title or how important their deals are. It's how they treat people when they have no obligation to treat them well. It's how they act when they think no one important is watching. You fail that test today. But you get another chance. Most people don't get the kind of wake-up call you just got. Don't waste it. I opened the door and left him sitting there alone in that conference room. The rest of my trip to New York was uneventful. I had my meeting, handled my business, and flew back a few days later. I made a point of checking in with a customer relations department the following week. Marcus Thornton had sent letters, real ones, apparently quite heartfelt, according to the staff who received them. He'd acknowledged his behavior, apologized without making excuses, and even included personal touches that showed he'd actually thought about what each person experienced. 6 months later, when his platinum status was reinstated, he sent me a letter directly. I still have it somewhere. In it, he explained that that day on the plane had been a turning point for him. He'd been so focused on success, so driven by competition and ambition that he'd lost sight of basic humanity. He'd started therapy. He'd reconnected with his family who he'd been neglecting. And he'd made changes in how he ran his business, treating his employees with more respect and dignity. I don't know if that change lasted. I hope it did. I'd like to think that sometimes when we're confronted with our worst behavior, we have the courage to become better. Here's what I took away from that experience. Respect isn't something you earn through money or status or achievements. It's something every human being deserves simply by virtue of being human. The old man sitting in economy, the young flight attendant serving drinks, the pilot flying the plane, the businessman in the expensive suit. We all deserve to be treated with basic dignity and respect. And for those of you out there who have achieved success, who have money and power and influence, remember that those things are privileges, not rights. They don't make you better than anyone else. They just make you more responsible for how you treat others. Because at the end of the day, when everything else is stripped away, the titles, the money, the accomplishments, all we really have is how we treated other people. That's the legacy that matters. That's what people remember. So the next time you're on a plane or in a store or anywhere else where you're tempted to use your status as a weapon, remember you never know who you're talking to. That old man might own the airline, but more importantly, he's a human being who deserves respect. And that's your